Hi, I heard my video did not upload yesterday, so I want to give it another shot. We're going to read chapters 51 to 53 from Front Desk. So I heard that it got cut off yesterday, so let's give it a try. Chapter 51. I hopped and skipped over to the Topaz Inn the next afternoon to tell the security guard the good news. You can rip up that ridiculous list of yours, I told him. But he just shrugged. Better safe than sorry, he said. But I just told you, Hank didn't do it. Neither did Mrs. Robinson or any of the other black customers. Mr. Lorenz did it. He's the one you should put on your list. No matter what I said, though, the crazy security guard refused to get rid of his list. He kept saying, "It's a free country. I can do whatever I want." I wanted to shake him and say, "You're not getting it. That's not what free means. Free means innocent until proven guilty, not guilty, no matter how innocent." I stormed back to the Cala Vista. Hank was in the parking lot chatting with some customers. As soon as he saw my face, he asked, "What's wrong?" He followed me inside the front office, and I told him what happened. "What do we do?" I asked him. Hank didn't say anything for a long time. Then he reached across the front desk and he grabbed a blank piece of paper. "Do what you do best," he said, putting the paper in front of me. "Will you help me?" I asked Hank. Hank nodded. "Sure," he said. That afternoon, we worked together on the letter. I wrote most of it, but Hank helped me with certain words, like discriminatory, a word I did not know before. Here's the letter, and you can see she crossed out some things. So, "Dear Stores, I know that the security guard from the Topaz Inn gave you a list of bad customers, but it is not actually a list of bad customers. It's a list of black customers. He put them on the list because he seems to think that all black customers are bad. But that's one, not true. And two, incredibly mean, cross out mean, discriminatory. I know it's not true because my good friend is black and he is one of the kindest people I know. Also, I just solved a case involving a stolen car, and guess what? The thief was not black. Actually, he wasn't even a thief. He was the owner. That just goes to show you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. So I am asking you to please tear up the list. Let's treat all our customers with kindness and respect, and not judge anyone by the color of their skin. If you have any questions, please call me at 555-281-0482. Sincerely, Mia Tang, Assistant Manager, Cala Vista Motel. I was very proud of our little letter, and so was Hank. Hank said I hit the issue on the nose, which made me smile. I wrote out 10 copies of the letter by hand and went door to door to all the shops on our street. At most stores, the person inside barely looked at my letter and just put it aside, saying they'd read it later. But then, back at the motel, my phone started ringing. First, the man from the liquor store called up. "Darn right you shouldn't judge a customer by the way they look. I mean, heck, if I judged all my customers by the way they look, I'd be out of business. Half my customers can't even walk straight," he said. I ticked yes next to the liquor store in my notebook. The guy at the convenience store on our street called up next. His voice shook as he spoke. "I came over from the Philippines 7 years ago," said Mr. Ibian. "I'd forgotten what it's like to be judged. I'm ripping up the list right now." That was a yes for the convenience store. The laundromat called next. "I never used his silly list anyway. Clothes are clothes. Doesn't matter to me who they're on," said Mr. Bhagawati. Yes for the laundromat. 8 yeses later, it was just down to the other 2 motels, Lagoon Motel and Topaz Inn. I knew Topaz Inn was out, but Lagoon Motel I still had a shot at. I grabbed my letter and headed over there again. The manager was an old guy with a raspy voice. He frowned when he saw me. "What do you want?" he asked. "Did you read my letter?" I asked. "Yeah, I read your letter," he said. "And?" "I don't know," he said. "Don't get me wrong, kid. I get where you're coming from. But you and I both know that every time we push that buzzer, we are judging someone based on the way they look. I mean, it's not like we're judging them based on their personality or how they eat a fig. We are making a quick 10-second decision based on what they look like," he said. "But that's different," I said. "How's it different?" "It's not based on their skin color," I said. "It's based on other things like, are they walking funny, which probably means they're drunk? Are they pounding on the front door, or are they knocking politely?" "Yeah, but you think about it." I could tell he was one of those people who just loved to argue, and we were going to be there all day, so I decided to cut to the chase. "Look, I've got 7 shops who've agreed to not follow the list, plus us. If you join us, great. If you don't, I'm just going to write a letter to the mayor's office." "Gosh darn it, kid," he humphed, throwing his arms up. "You and your letters." "Are you in or are you out?" I asked him firmly. There was a long pause. "Fine, I'm in," he said finally. In the end, even Topaz Inn caved too. I told our towel and sheet suppliers, who also happened to be their suppliers, and he was African American. Once he heard about the list, he marched over to the Topaz Inn and threw a fit, threatening to stop selling them supplies unless they cut it out. Without a supplier for their towels and bedding, the Topaz Inn could not operate their business, so they had no choice but to get rid of their list. They apologized and blamed it all on their security guard, whom they promptly fired. As the security guard crawled by a day after the Topaz let him go, he hollered at me. "You happy now? You cost me my job, kid." I shook my head at him. From the way he was walking, I could tell he'd been drinking. "We Chinese are supposed to watch out for each other." "Not if you're being racist." "My life's ruined because of you." I turned my back to him, but that just made him more mad. "Hey, I'm talking to you." "Yeah, you. You're sitting there in your nice air-conditioned office. You think it's all fun and games, don't you? Well, guess what?" he slurred. "It's not. You have no idea what it's like for the rest of us. You don't know what it's like to be fired, to have no money and nowhere to go." That did it. "You have no idea what I know," I yelled back at him. "I've been getting fired since before you could read. I could write a book on what it's like to have no money. You know what else I know? That's no excuse to treat people like dirt." The security guard walked away without another word. Chapter 52. There's a saying in Chinese that goes, "Never forget how much rice you eat." It's a reminder to stay humble, to stay real. Just because you have an important job doesn't mean you're better than anybody else. You still eat rice like the rest of us. Well, that security guard, he definitely forgot. He let the power of his position go straight to his head, and he used it to do horrible things. I wondered if that's what happened to Uncle Zhang's boss, too, when he took away everybody's passports. At the thought of Uncle Zhang, I felt the stirrings of hope. Did he give the letter to his boss yet? Uncle Zhang called us from my payphone 2 days later. "You'll never believe it," he said into the phone. "The letter worked. I'm free." He told us that when he showed his employer my letter, the guy freaked out. He couldn't believe that Uncle Zhang had found an attorney, or at least someone who was able to write good enough English to help him. He got really scared and immediately gave Uncle Zhang's papers back to him. Not only that, he gave all the other workers back their papers too. It was the most incredible feeling ever, knowing that something I wrote actually changed someone's life. As my mom and dad and I cheered and congratulated Uncle Zhang, my eyes slid to the closet where the printout of the essay contest lay. Maybe, just maybe, I could change our lives too. "Okay, kids, get your pencils out. Mrs. Douglas said in class, we're writing a story again. This time, I want you to write about a small moment in your life. A small moment in your life. A small moment? You mean like a moment that didn't really mean anything? Someone asked. Quite the contrary. A moment that meant everything, Mrs. Douglas said. Think of a time when you were ecstatic or terrified and really zoom in so we know exactly what it felt like. I stared down at the piece of white paper in the front of me. My head was like a train station. So many stories buzzed in and out. I thought about all the things that happened these last few months, all the miracles and heartbreaks. A chorus of voices flooded into me. Some days my body was completely inside the dumpster, and all you saw were those two little legs kicking in the air, Uncle Lee had said. I kneeled before them, holding their hands as they talked about their Chinese maids and how don't they all steal, Aunt Ling said. I don't know why she slapped me. All I said to her was, "Hey, baby," said Uncle Fung. When people look at you, they see a nice, sweet Chinese girl. When they look at me, do you know what they see? A criminal, Hank had said. I borrowed the money so she could die knowing that her only son was okay out there, that I made it in America, Uncle Zhang had cried. Even if you're American, you'll still be my sister. You'll always be my sister, wherever you are. It was that last voice, Shen's voice, that begged, let me out. I wiggled, hoping the feeling would pass. I didn't know how I felt about Mrs. Douglas knowing that much about me. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That snowy day in Beijing, how hard it was to step on the plane, how the first thing we did when we arrived was to take a shower. I'd never seen a shower before, a private shower, not like those groups ones at the bathhouses in China. In China, there was a bathhouse in every neighborhood, and everyone went. Sometimes I'd even see my teacher there. Awkward. There was awkward. And then there was taking a shower next to your teacher. Awkward. Those days are over. Here we have showers. My dad's friend had bragged when he picked us up from the airport and took us to his apartment. And you can even open your mouth in the shower and drink the water too. It's clean here. You don't have to boil it. That first day I stood in the shower for almost an hour with my mouth open, drenched in bliss, gulping down the deliciousness as the water rained down on me. Afterwards, when I looked in the mirror, guilt itched my eyes. Had I just traded my cousin in for a shower? I had wondered. The words gushed out of me. I remembered what Lupe once said about drawing, how it was all in the detail. I closed my eyes and tried to recall every color, sound, and smell. I wrote in such a trance, nearly jumping in my seat, when 20 minutes later Mrs. Douglas declared there were only 2 minutes left. I looked down at my river of words, then I glanced over at Jason next to me. Panic seized me. The words were so open, so exposed. My story looked like a belly button. I immediately wanted to cover it up. Then I remembered something. The itching and wiggling like a spider was crawling underneath my skin. I'd seen it somewhere before. Where had I seen it? Oh, yes, I remember. It was on Uncle Zhang's face when he told us he was a modern slave. It was on Hank's face, too, when he finally opened up to me about why nobody wanted to hire him. And look what happened. Their lives changed. If I wanted my life to change, I, too, needed to get past the itchy, wiggly feeling. Okay, guys, Mrs. Douglas said. Who's finished? I took a deep breath and raised my hand. Chapter 53. The moment I handed Mrs. Douglas my story on coming to America was also the moment I decided I had to enter the essay competition. I was ready. I could do this. There was still this tricky issue of the $300 entry fee. I'd been so preoccupied with finding out who stole the missing car, I hadn't been putting out my tip jar. When I went home and fished out the entry form, panic filled my lungs. The deadline was in less than a week. There was no way I could get $300 in tips in that kind of time. Asking my parents for the money was out. It was the holiday season. You'd think the holiday season would be a busy time for motels, but surprisingly, it's not. Folks would rather stuff themselves inside a tiny closet than to have to stay in a motel over the holidays. So I couldn't ask my parents. That left only one option. My eyes slid down to the bag underneath my parents' bureau. The lucky pennies. I know they weren't my lucky pennies. They were our lucky pennies. I thought about the look on my dad's face whenever we found one of the rare ones, like Christmas morning. He was so proud of them. I knew if I told him, he'd never let me sell them. He was always talking about how much they'd be worth one day, how they'd appreciate in value over time. He'd never let me do it. He'd kill himself scraping together the $300 some other way, probably by skipping meals and not buying my mom a Christmas present. And that I couldn't let him do, not after everything they had been through this year. So I took the bag of special pennies and headed over to Hank's. Hank looked down at the bag. "Are you sure about this?" Hank asked. "I'm positive," I said to him. I explained to him why I needed the money. Hank nodded and agreed to go downtown first thing tomorrow before his shift. I gave him the address of a street in downtown LA where they traded rare and valuable coins and stamps. I'd looked it up in the library. Before I handed them over, I took one last look at the pennies. I held them to my cheek, and then I kissed them goodbye. "I'm going to miss you guys," I whispered. The next day, Hank returned with $312. I sucked in a breath as he handed me the crisp bills. "Here you are," he said when he handed me the last of the bills. "Now go win a motel." "I will," I said with a grin. Our luck was going to change soon. I could feel it in my bones. As the honeycomb sun dipped lower in the sky, I sat hunched over at the front desk and I wrote my story. She's writing her story on this page. If I Owned a Motel by Mia Tang. If I owned a motel, I would treat every customer like family. I would bring all guests an extra blanket or a hot water bottle if they were cold. I would make them a cup of tea if they were having a bad day, and I would get it out of them what happened. Because sometimes terrible things happen, but there's nothing more terrible than not having anybody to tell it to. Then, after they tell me, I would try to help them. Sometimes problems seem humongous in your head, but if you tell someone, you'd be surprised at what could happen. After we've solved it, we can celebrate together by playing Monopoly after dinner or jumping into the pool together. Life's short, and it's important to celebrate the good stuff when it happens. I would also protect myself and my customers by putting in a security camera, bulletproof glass inside the front office, and a gate so cars cannot be stolen. I would charge customers $20 per night for a room, but give them a discount if they were a weekly, because the weeklies have been living there for a long, long time, and that's a lot to pay every day. If I win your motel, I promise to always treat it with love, kindness, and respect. Your motel won't just be a business to me. It will be a home. Hank came into the front desk just as I was finishing my essay. I handed it to him. "What do you think?" I asked him when he was done reading. "It's wonderful," he said. "Just wonderful." "Is the grammar okay? Do you think I should add anything?" I asked. "I wouldn't change a thing," Hank said. His steady eyes looked straight into mine, and years of doubt melted away. "So this is it then," I said. "I should just mail it." Hank reached down, dug out a card from his back pocket, and handed it to me. It was Lupe's comment card, the one that said, "You can't win if you don't play." I smiled. The next day, I mailed in my essay. And that's where chapter 53 ends. See you next time.